The Social Security Administration is very serious about keeping your information out of the hands of scammers, but they need your help. Here are a couple of things you can do to secure your Social Security information online. First, open your personal My Social Security account by going to ssa.gov/myaccount. Doing so allows you to access your information anytime. It also adds an extra layer of security by preventing someone else from creating an account in your name and gaining access to your information. Next, set up two-step authentication. Your My Social Security account will ask you to choose a second method of identification in addition to a username and password, such as sending a code to your cell phone or email address when you log in. This extra step will help protect your account from unauthorized use and potential identity theft. For more Social Security tips, go to aarp.org/social security.
Hello, my name is Teresa Jones. I am one of the Associate State Directors of Advocacy and Outreach for the Illinois State Office. I want to welcome you to this virtual event with AARP Illinois, featuring our honored guest, David Nanz, FBI Special Agent in charge of the Springfield Field Office. Thank you for joining us today and participating in this statewide virtual event to discuss trending frauds and scams and how to protect yourself and your loved ones. AARP is a nonprofit, nonpartisan member organization. AARP is in your corner, fighting issues that matter to you and your family. We work to strengthen communities and advocate for families with a focus on health security, financial stability, and personal fulfillment. As your wise friend and fierce defender, we are advocating for the most impactful issues and policies that improve the financial standing of adults 50 plus and their families in the state. This event is part of AARP Illinois Make Illinois Affordable campaign, an education, outreach, and advocacy effort that's meant to address pocketbook issues that Illinoisans deal with daily that directly impact all of our financial health and the quality of our life. Through this effort, AARP Illinois is working on issues such as, but not limited to, helping you better manage Illinois high property taxes, lower prescription drug prices, expand access to home and community-based services, rather than much more costly nursing home care, and fighting unnecessary utility rate hikes on your electric and gas bills. Today's event officially launches a financial education series of events. These are to help introduce you to tools and resources available to help you save even more money. Now, we realize that all consumers have concerns regarding property taxes, debt management, and financial planning, emergency savings accounts, retirement savings, Social Security benefit planning, and in today's case, fraud. Today, we are honored to bring you a fraud expert from the FBI. And in upcoming events, we will continue bringing experts and resources to further help you improve your financial and retirement security. For more information on upcoming events, please keep an eye on AARP Illinois Facebook and Twitter profiles, as well as our website, www.aarp.org/il. Now let's get started with today's virtual event on senior frauds and scams. We have a lot of valuable information to share and to discuss with you. Criminal scammers, they use a wide range of scams to convince people to hand over money or sensitive personal information. And it's scary. But today, we are equipping you with the tools and tips to protect yourself and your loved ones. I am pleased to introduce our guest, David Nanz, FBI Special Agent in charge of the Springfield Field Office. Welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm really happy to be here, and I appreciate you letting me join your program. I look forward to talking about some of the top scams that we see targeting seniors and some ideas and best practices on how to avoid those scams.
Thank you. First, what are the most common scams out here in Illinois that are currently targeting seniors, and especially those 50 plus?
Well, so there's no shortage of scams targeting seniors, and I'll go over sort of the top scams that we're seeing now. And I know during this program we'll have the opportunity to go into more detail. But right off the top, romance scams, the foreign lottery scams, money mule scams, the government imposter scams. I'd also add utility imposter scams with that, the grandparent scams, investment fraud, robocall type scams, the overpayment scam, and a number of cyber scams, including phishing, where the scammer is trying to get your personal information over your computer. So those are some of the top scams that we're seeing, and I know during this program we'll have the opportunity to go into more detail into each of these scams.
Well, Special Agent Nanz, can you tell listeners how the FBI can help seniors and community members in the wake of a scam or fraud?
Yeah, absolutely. So right off the bat, the mission of the FBI is to protect the American people. And a big part of that, of course, is identifying those who commit these frauds against seniors and holding them accountable by charging them and putting them in jail. But another big component of protecting the American people is also educating the American people. And so we want to let our citizenry know what the top to hold the fraudsters accountable. The reality is there's just too many fraudsters out there, many of whom actually operate from overseas. And so because we're not going to get all of them, it's very important that we educate the public on what these scams are, how to avoid them. But when someone is the unfortunate victim of a scam, the FBI is in a position, once we get that information, to work with that victim, provide victim services to that person, and do everything we can to recover stolen funds for them.
You kind of covered this a little bit, but where does one go if they have been victimized by a scam or to report a fraud attempt?
So there's many different places to report fraud. For starters, contact your local police department for one, but we also want people to contact the FBI. Here in the Springfield Field Office in Illinois, we cover 84 of the 102 counties. And so we invite people to call us directly. The number for the Springfield Field Office is 217-522-9675. And then the FBI as a whole has an internet site where people can lodge fraud complaints. It's called IC3.gov. That's the Internet Fraud Complaint Center that is operated by the FBI. But again, it's IC3.gov. And this is a website where people can put all the details of any fraud scam that they've come across, and then that information will be processed by the FBI.
That's great. Thank you for that. Can you talk about financial security scams specifically in Illinois and what to look out for?
Well, sure. So, all fraud essentially is a lie to steal money. And that's what it comes down to. And these scammers are very good at coming up with different ways to do that. So I identified earlier a number of these types of scams. And at the end of the day, it is to take money from your accounts. And we've seen time and time again that unfortunately, senior citizens are particularly targeted with these scams. We have seen scams that have literally taken the life savings from certain individuals, unfortunately. And so clearly, all of these scams, to one degree or another, impact someone's financial security. And as we, during this program, have the opportunity to go over some of these scams more specifically, we'll have the opportunity to talk about ways to identify these scams and ways to avoid them.
So let's talk about government imposters. Now, this is when someone contacts you and pretends to be from an agency like Social Security Administration or Internal Revenue Service, even the FBI, correct?
Correct. So this is a widespread scam. And here's the thing that's important for everyone to remember. No legitimate person from the government is going to call you and ask you for money. If you actually owe money to the IRS or some other government agency, you're going to receive a letter in the mail that talks about that. If you owe money to your property taxes, for example, you're going to receive a letter in the mail. And what we advise people to do is, because even then, there are some letters out there that are fraudulent. So if you get a letter suggesting that you owe money, that you need to pay someone, look up on your own the true phone number for that entity. Not necessarily what's on the letter, but look for the true phone number and call that agency and actually confirm whether you owe that money or not. So that's one thing that's important to remember when it comes to letters. But in terms of the phone calls, again, no one is going to call you from the government and ask you for money. And certainly no one's going to call you and threaten you. What we see a lot with these government imposter type scams is not only is the scammer asking for money, but he's communicating some dire consequence that will come to the victim if they don't give that money. It rattles the victim, it makes them very nervous. They're hoping that jars the victim into actually sending them money. So again, the first rule to avoid this scam is understanding that true government officials are not going to call you and ask you for money. And on that point, let me say one other thing too on this. We recommend, because the phone is used not only by the government imposters, by a lot of different types of scammers. So one thing that people can do to really help them avoid a lot of different types of scams is don't answer the phone unless you know who's calling you. Most people do have caller ID. And unless you recognize the number, don't answer the phone. If a legitimate caller is trying to reach you, they'll leave a message, right? And you can call them back. So the scammers are hoping that the intended victim will answer that phone, because once they get that intended victim on the phone, they then can go through their script, a well-rehearsed script, a script that has been social engineered to get the victim to send them money. Well, all of us can avoid being told that script if we don't answer the phone to begin with, and let the person leave a message. And when we listen to that voicemail, we'll have a pretty good idea whether that's a legitimate call or not. In many cases, the scammer won't even leave a message to begin with.
That's very interesting. I never thought about that. So that kind of leads into the next question. You almost answered it. It's, how does a senior protect themselves from Social Security scams? Also, can you discuss this scam and how it truly can hurt a senior in their finances?
Sure. Well, the Social Security scam, kind of falls under the umbrella of government imposter scams. This is a very common scam. I personally have received calls purportedly from the Social Security Administration. But again, no one is going to call you from the Social Security Administration asking for your Social Security number, asking you for money. And another thing to keep in mind is, if you think about it, if someone is calling you, purportedly either from the Social Security Administration or another government agency, and they're telling you there's some sort of problem with your account or anything else, ask them, hey, well, what's my account number? What are you calling me about? Because they actually, in most cases, don't have that information. They're trying to get it from you. And of course, and so if you find yourself on the phone with a, what appears to be a suspicious conversation, it certainly warrants asking them, well, who exactly you were trying to reach? What's the full name of the person? What Social Security number do you think I have? Because again, they're trying to get information from you. But again, never give your personal information to anyone who asks you, who unsolicited, I should say, in an unsolicited manner, asks you for that information. And again, the Social Security Administration is never going to call you and ask you to send them money.
That's great advice. Thank you for that. I think a lot of seniors forget and are lonely sometimes, and they just answer that phone. So knowing that a criminal, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say that I think that's definitely true. I'm no psychologist, but in my 20 years with the with the adult children of seniors, they have identified as sort of the part of the susceptibility, if you will, is unlike a younger person who might have a full-time job, might have young kids, is busy and doing a million different things. A number of adult children have identified for me sort of that susceptibility of the loneliness factor, someone sitting at home who maybe wants to talk to someone. And I would just urge people to resist that because, again, a legitimate person, they'll leave a message, right? And then you can decide whether you want to call them back or not.
This is great stuff. Thank you so much. Criminal scammer. Now, they're seeking to instill fear and an urgency to act without taking a pause. Now, businesses such as technology companies and utility companies, they're also commonly impersonated, unfortunately. For example, a tech scammer calls you on your phone and offers to remove a virus from your computer without having to go into a brick and mortar store or fix a particular piece of software. And it also requires a senior to send them a gift card or wire cash. With a utility scam, you may receive a phone call from the energy company that's claiming that you have not paid your bill in months and they are getting ready to shut off your service. Well, in these scenarios, scammers are trying to get the target to become fearful and that something bad is about to happen. Also, to convince them that they must take action immediately. And that action always ends up involving money. Special Agent Nanz, can you discuss these types of scams and how listeners can protect themselves?
Sure. Well, in the beginning, I had mentioned the utility scam, and you brought it up again here. And yeah, this is a common one where they'll call the homeowner and say, for example, you're behind on your electric bill, and we're going to turn your electricity off in 5 hours unless you do this. So again, as you pointed out, kind of instilling that fear, instilling a sense of urgency. And as I kind of alluded to earlier, no utility company is going to call you like that. If you were actually behind on some type of utility bill, you would get a letter in the mail. That letter would look like, similar utility bills, perhaps, or paperwork you received before, and you have the opportunity to actually call the legitimate number of that utility to confirm whether or not you are late on your bill. So right off the bat, that should be a huge red flag to anyone if they're told that they need to act immediately over the phone or the utilities will be cut off. And again, some of these other sort of imposter type calls, could be someone from the IRS, for example. You owe the government money in taxes. If you do not immediately pay, you will be arrested tomorrow. Again, instilling fear. Of course, the IRS does not operate that way. They do not call someone and threaten them with arrest. That's just not how the federal government operates. So beyond all those red flags, the other big red flag is never pay any type of debt with gift cards. That should be a huge red flag. If you actually owe business money, if you owe the government money, they're going to want a personal check. They're going to want some sort of electronic transfer through their website in a way that people pay bills, an ACH transfer, for example. But no legitimate entity requests payment through gift cards. This is a big part of the scam for some of these fraudsters because it is an easy way for them to get the money. They're asking you to buy a gift card, then give them the number. That money's gone, it's gone off the gift card. So right off the bat, never ever make payment to anyone through gift cards.
Some of these things are just horrible. If you're joining AARP Illinois today, we're honored to have David Nanz, Special Agent in charge of the Springfield office. And we're discussing how to protect yourselves from frauds and scams. So, another question here. Why are scammers so good at what they do? And can you discuss the heightened emotional state that scammers like to invoke to get vulnerable seniors to be in distress or the ether and succumb to fear and unfortunately be scammed? You touched a little bit on that, but can you go a little deeper?
Sure. Well, the first part of your question, why are they so good at what they do? Well, one answer is because they have a lot of practice doing it. A lot of these scammers are full-time fraudsters that, again, as I alluded to earlier, they have scripts they've practiced on. They're very good at social engineering. They're very good at manipulating. And they learn, like anyone else, from their mistakes. And they will hone and they will adjust their messaging and their social engineering as time goes on, to get better and better at what they're doing. And again, as we were talking earlier, they are preying on emotional vulnerabilities of folks, whether it be instilling that sense of fear by saying there's going to be some consequence unless the victim doesn't pay, within 24 hours or whatever the case may be, or in the case of the romance scams, knowing that someone may be alone and taking advantage of that by pretending to be a romantic partner and so forth, and then inducing that victim to give them money. So these folks are very good at what they do. So what that means is we all have to be very good at doing our due diligence, making sure that we're asking questions and not making quick decisions on the demands of some of these folks.
Now, this gift card scam thing that's going around, can you discuss that latest trend and how to protect yourself and your loved ones from being frauded?
Sure. Well, we talked a little bit about, the gift cards earlier, and it's important to keep in mind that a lot of the scammers we're seeing, as I mentioned earlier, are overseas. So because they're overseas, it's not easy for them to get your money. They can trick you into giving you their money, but then the question is, how do they actually get it, right? They don't want a personal check. That's not going to work. They don't really want a wire transfer because then they have to identify a bank account overseas to receive that wire transfer. So a very easy way to sort of transfer money is through these gift cards. And so, I think everyone has experience with these gift cards. They can be purchased at Walmart. They can be purchased all sorts of different types of stores, and they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes and different amounts. But one thing they have in common is, they do have a code on the back, sometimes a PIN. And once someone has that information, they can bleed the money off that card, whether they sit in New York or Nigeria. And so that's why the scammer wants a victim to purchase those gift cards and then give them that code and or PIN on the back of the card, because then they can bleed that off. And the victim then, again, unlike a personal check, unlike a credit card, is just not going to have any recourse. So that's why we really advise people never provide, if you do have a gift card, never provide the code or the PIN on the back of it to anyone.
So I'm going to ask one more question about the gift card. I've heard of people that have purchased gift cards. They didn't give the number to anyone, but when they went to use it, it was too late. Have you had those?
Well, are you talking about if there's a zero balance on the card? Or
Yes. And you just purchased it from Walmart, let's say.
Yeah, sure. So again, the scammers are in some cases are able to trick you into giving you their personal information, their bank account information, their cell phone information. And so sometimes they're able to manipulate you into making payment for these cards, and then they're able to bleed the cards before you even know what's going on. So again, it gets to the point of what are gift cards really for, right? They're to give a gift. So if you want to buy a gift card for your granddaughter or grandson for their birthday, by all means, but never buy a gift card at the direction of someone else.
Okay, thank you. So what advice do you have for someone who realized they were a scam target and they bought these gift cards and shared the information off the back?
Well, if they've already shared the information, unfortunately, in many cases, it's going to be too late. But what they should do, try to take immediate action. There is almost always going to be a phone number on the back of the gift card because there's banks and other financial institutions that actually issue these gift cards. and immediately call that number and ask them to freeze the card or cancel the card. That would be really the primary way to try to stop the money from being bleeded off the card. But as I said before, the reality is that once the scammer has those codes, they can very quickly bleed the money off those cards. But in some cases, certainly, if the person is able to act quickly enough, there could be still a balance on the card and could potentially recover some of the funds. And of course, report it to the FBI as well, so that we can look into it.
Okay, thank you. So now I want to talk to you about some of these romance scams. So these are a form of an imposter scam where the scammer takes on a fake online persona to lure potential targets into an online relationship. And it usually ends with the target losing money. Can you talk more about how these scams work?
Sure. So in the romance scam, the fraudster develops an online relationship with a victim and makes the victim believe that the victim is actually loved, actually cared for. And once the fraudster establishes that bond, then comes the request to send money. So right off the bat, that should be a huge red flag for anyone. If you are in a legitimate sort of preliminary relationship with someone you've met, they're not going to ask you for money. So that should be a huge red flag. Don't ever send money to someone that you met online like that. But the way this would typically work is once the fraudster, again, induces the victim into believing that they're in this relationship, they'll generally start off small. So it might be something to the effect like, hey, I have a relative in the hospital. The relative doesn't have insurance. If you could just send $5,000 to cover the medical bills. And it would mean so much to me. It would show me how much you love me and everything else. So they're trying to tug on the heartstrings of these folks and seem very sympathetic. And so again, red flag, never send money that's requested of you in any type of dating relationship over the internet. But then sort of how these scams then continue to grow. And we've had victims who have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars to romance scams. So it starts out small, and then once that initial money is sent, then a week later, there'll be a request for more money and more money and more money. So again, ways to avoid this scam: one, never send money right off the bat. And number two, if you feel yourself entering into a preliminary relationship, have a video chat with a person. Actually talk to them on the phone, because in all cases, the photo that has been used on the fake profile of the romance scammer is actually not the picture of the actual scammer. So they will not want to video chat with you because you would see they're a different person. Nor will they want to even talk to you on the phone because that nice woman you're dating is actually a man in Nigeria. And so he will not want to talk to you on the phone. So again, those are all going to be red flags if you're asked to send money, or if the person you're dating doesn't want to talk on the phone and doesn't want a video chat.
Oof. Well, there's another common scam that it's the overpayment bogus check scam that involves the fraudster that convinces the victim to deposit a bogus check in the victim's bank account. And then they direct the victim to transfer some of the money. Now, can you discuss just a little bit on how this works and how you can protect yourself from this?
Yeah, so this is a pretty common scam. And even though in today's society, I think we tend to use checks less and less now than we did even 10 years ago. But something that's really important for people to remember is the volume of fake counterfeit checks that are floating out there. And so what we tell people is, if someone who you don't know gives you a check, assume that that check is bad until it actually clears the bank. And in some banks, it can take as long as 10 days to have a check fully cleared. And the reason why I say that is because even if the check appears to be a cashier's check, an official check. And we've had some victims that have actually told us, hey, I believe this check was real because it said cashier's check. But what they're not realizing is that it might say cashier's check because the scammer has used a high quality laser printer to print that check, but it's a fake check. It's not real. And so how the scammers use these fake checks in what we refer to as the overpayment scam is, let's say you're selling something on the internet or through a newspaper classified ad, whatever the case may be. And for example, let's say you're selling a watch for $500. Well, you're contacted by a potential buyer. He says, I want to buy your watch, and I'm sending you a check for $1,000 instead of $500. So that's the overpayment. And they give some reason why they're sending you a check for more than the asking price. And they tell you then, okay, so deposit the check for $1,000 and then transfer me back the extra $500. That's the overpayment. And unfortunately, some victims fall for this and they deposit that check, and they'll actually send the money, the overpayment portion of the check, to the fraudster. And then 5, 6, 7 days later, the bank informs them that check was bad and the bank does a chargeback on their account. So I can't even tell you how many people have sadly over the years fallen victim to this. And that's why we always tell people to be very skeptical of any check they get, unless of course it's from a family member or someone they know, and just give it time to clear the bank. And everyone can contact their own bank and find out what's the time frame for my bank to have that check fully cleared. Wait for that to clear before they do anything with the funds.
Now, this next one I'm going to ask you about is a grandma-grandpa scam. And it's where the fraudster convinces the elderly people to send money to Mexico or some other country, saying, they need help with their grandchild who was purportedly was kidnapped or arrested. I mean, it seems like there's a simple answer to that, but it happens all the time. Can you just talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, this is a particularly vile scam because it really is taking advantage of a grandparent's love for their grandchildren. And so there's a lot of variations of this scam, but a couple of examples would be that the fraudsters, by the way, they do their homework in many cases before they try to orchestrate these scams. So for example, they will troll people's Facebook pages and other social media sites to identify family members, which is one reason we always recommend that people set the privacy settings on their social media, Facebook and other sites, so that only their friends and family are able to view. But if the fraudster through open source searching or social media searching is able to identify the names of a grandchild, what they'll do is they'll call the grandparent and they'll say, hey, for example, I'm a lawyer in Mexico. Your grandson, Johnny, was down here for spring break. He's been arrested for an alcohol charge or something like that. We need you to send $1,000 down here so that we can represent him, so we can bail him out of jail. Or they'll say, your granddaughter's been in a car accident in Cancun. She needs the medical bills to be paid. And what'll happen is, unfortunately, sometimes the grandparent, before confirming whether the grandchild was actually in Cancun or another location, will transfer the money based on the instructions of the fraudster. So these fraudsters are, again, taking advantage of sort of the emotional feelings of the grandparent in these sort of situations. So when these things come up, our recommendation is, of course, before ever transferring any money, make some calls to other family members, right, and determine, like, hey, is my relative actually in Mexico? Have they really been in an auto accident, and so forth and so on, before actually transferring any money?
Some of these things are just unbelievable. If you're joining AARP Illinois today, we're honored to have David Nanz, FBI Special Agent in charge of the Springfield Field Office. We're discussing how to protect yourself from frauds and scams. So, Special Agent, this is a key takeaway for today's event. Where can people turn to for help if they think they or a loved one has been a target of a scam?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the FBI, that's what we're here for. We're here to protect the American people. We want to be made aware of this information, especially because a lot of these scammers are targeting so many people. And so we're able to connect the dots. So even if, let's say you're a victim and maybe you've only lost $1,000 and you say, well, maybe that doesn't arise to what the FBI would look at. We want that information because there could be 100 other victims in your shoes. And, we need to get that information. And as I said earlier, we can provide victim services and so forth. The reality is in many cases, we're not able to recover the funds, although we would certainly work to do that. But by reporting the information, we're hopefully able to identify who the fraudsters are and protect future people from being victimized.
Well, unfortunately, we're almost out of time. So do you have any closing words for our listeners today?
Yes, I would just say, just always be aware. It's important for all of us to update ourselves on, sort of what the latest scams might be and so forth, periodically doing a little research, doing your due diligence. One scam we didn't really talk about much today, investment scams, which are very common, promising guaranteed large returns on your investment. People should always look at that with a skeptical eye, and it comes down to just doing your homework, doing your due diligence. Again, just reiterate, don't answer the phone unless you know who's calling you. Just wait for the person to leave a message. Delete suspicious emails. And of course, don't click on an attachment on an email unless you're 100% sure that it is official, legitimate email, because that is a way, of course, the scammers are able to introduce malware and other type viruses into our computer systems. Never provide your personal information again to people who have contacted you in an unsolicited fashion. Never pay any debt whatsoever with gift cards. And again, just being aware and not being afraid to talk to a loved one. If you do have a concern, if you're debating whether to send money to someone, talk to a friend, talk to a loved one, and ask them, hey, does this make sense to you? Because the scammers are hoping that you will act quickly without checking, without asking questions. And by just taking a little time, slowing it down, I think many people can avoid falling victim to these types of scams.
That's a lot of great information. Thank you so much, Special Agent Nanz. If you've learned something new today, please share it with your family, your friends, and everyone in your network. We know from research that if you know about a specific scam, you're 80% less likely to engage with it. And if you do, you're 40% less likely to lose money to it. So if you share what you learned, share your stories of your own encounters with scams, and together we can stop that next target from becoming a scammer's next victim. So thanks to Special Agent in charge of the Springfield office, David Nanz, for answering our questions. And thank you, our AARP members, volunteers, and listeners for participating in this discussion. We hope that you learned something new about scams and fraud today. For more information, please contact the AARP Fraud Helpline, toll free at 1-877-908-3360 or at aarp.org. Thank you and have a great day. This concludes our virtual event.
Each year, fraud siphons billions from investors. Here are 5 ways to avoid losing your money to investment fraud. Be wary of free investment seminars, especially the ones that include lunch. Don't get dollar signs in your eyes. Con artists like to dangle the prospect of fabulous wealth to distract you from realizing the whole thing is a scam. Don't jump on inside information posted to social media, chat rooms, or forums promoting shares of a company that promise to go up. Don't judge an investment opportunity by a company's attractive, professional-looking website. These days, crooks can easily create a convincing online facade. Don't make investment decisions based upon TV commercials, phone calls, or email solicitations. For more tips on how to avoid scams, go to aarp.org/fraudwatchnetwork.